Well, you know my preoccupation with history because it's the guide for the future for us. Tonight we're going to explore a more recent piece of our history which has been unpleasant for most of us in one way or another. And for many people here in South Florida, the Holocaust has had direct impact. It's the point of departure for our discussion tonight of this book by Samuel Pisar called Of Blood and Hope. Now, Mr. Pisar is concerned that we not devolve into just a discussion of the Holocaust and the horrors that it had, because it goes without saying it was a terrible time, and you yourself were at Auschwitz. And we could spend an hour with those tales of woe, but I think it's enough to be said that you were there, that you spent how many years there?
In all 4 years. I am possibly one of the youngest survivors. But the book is not a book about the Holocaust. It's an autobiographical book and an essay about the problems of today, political, economic, diplomatic. In other words, I'm trying to establish the link between my world, which had collapsed and destroyed everything around me, my family, my school friends, my town, my people, and the possible collapse that may be ahead of us and of our children as things seem to be sliding nationally and internationally from bad to worse.
I would guess that you're an exceptional person, and that for every one of you who has ended up coming out of a concentration camp and ending up with a PhD from Harvard and Sorbonne and advising the leaders of the world as you have, there are thousands who died alongside of you. Now, why did you survive? Do you think that you are a special person?
I don't think I'm a special person, and of course the destruction around me is astounding. Let me give you one statistic. In my town, in Białystok, eastern Poland, there were 900 students in my school. I am the only survivor. Now, the reason I survived, I believe, is that it was partly luck and to some degree science. When I was thrown into the pit of hell at the age of 13, it would have either broken me or, not having broken me, it matured me very, very quickly. I learned to develop muscles, not only physical, that's the least of it, muscles of the mind, of the brain, of the nervous system. In other words, I think I managed to summon the vital forces of life. Let's call it the adrenaline of survival. And I'm saying this because I see in it a symbol. You know, when I saw that huge American tank with a white star, a vision, my first vision of freedom, and that black GI who climbed out of the hatch and picked up that skeletal kid and pulled him down into the womb of freedom, to me, that was a symbol. That was the ultimate moment of survival. But before I got to that point, I had to rise to the challenge with everything I had. And this is the kind of mentality into which people, nations and societies must put themselves in order to face the challenges and the risks and the dangers of the future.
But let's be fair now, and I'm trying to represent people. Now, the average American has no concept of hunger, of the trials and tribulations of what happened in Europe 40 years ago. America's had 200 years of insulation from those kinds of experiences. And even of all the people that it happened to, you are still, I would guess, an exception to what happened to those people.
I'm an exception because I survived and so many others have perished. But
even of those who survived, though?
Even of those who survived. My struggle for survival, I might add, did not end with that big tank with a white star. It began again. I realized that Hitler had almost programmed my destruction because physically I was breathing, but that was not the happy ending. I had to remake myself. I had to accept the idea that I must study again, not having seen a school book for 6 years, not having been inside a classroom for 6 years. And there, again, it became a struggle for survival in a different context, in a different environment, to become a civilized man, to justify my survival, to undo a little particle of Hitler's work, to live out not only my life, but the lives of those who did not make it. These are the forces that were at work in my case. I would like to communicate that to many people today who are gloomy, desperate, and who want to give up. And the reason I wrote this book in the United States, not in Europe, where it became a massive bestseller, I wrote it on Cape Cod largely, in Massachusetts, because I wanted to be away from the bloody history of Europe while writing it, relate it to the United States, make Americans who have never suffered a disruptive war on their soil, who have never been overtaken by tyrants, to understand that this does relate to their lives, to their fears, and to their hopes for the future.
But let's be fair to Americans, to myself. To talk about, for me to think of of happening to my home, this station, this city, what happened in Europe is unthinkable, I guess.
This is how my parents used to reason.
Exactly.
In 1939,
Exactly.
in 1940, as the world was collapsing. They felt some danger, but it was not palpable. And, of course, no one really did anything. If we had known, we would have taken our destiny in our own hands. We would not have delegated our survival to some politicians or to some economists or God knows what. Survival begins at home. Maybe my father would have picked up his family and said, let's go and join our relatives in the United States. They did not do it. They were reasoning the way you have just described it, and that is a tremendous danger. We must understand that we are involved, people are involved, and the problems are challenging and disturbing and overwhelming indeed, but human beings have an infinite capacity to rise to a challenge, and the human spirit must be made to work. It is not something that does not concern us. No one will pull us out of it if we don't join that process.
And I struggle every day with how to make people truly believe the things you're saying. You have the same problem. You've written the book. You want people to really understand. But they say, well, of course he feels that way. It happened to him, but it's never happened to me or my grandfather or my great-grandparents.
This is why I did not want to write this book like the Harvard intellectual. You know, it's not my first book. I've written other books on economic and political subjects, and I've decided it's irrelevant. I wanted to write this book and show in the colors of flesh and blood how a family, middle-class family, a happy family, in a peaceful, cultured, prosperous town, one summer day finds itself in surroundings where everything is falling apart. The economy, the political system, the social system, there is violence in the streets, and an inevitable, inexorable process of destruction sets in that leads to a pilot project almost for the destruction of humanity. And I want them to feel it through, I want them to be acquainted. I didn't think I could bring myself to say it, with my mother as a human being, a beautiful young woman who had one day to ask herself the kind of question that a mother is normally doesn't have to ask itself. Am I going to put long pants on this boy or short pants? Maybe if I put long pants on him, they will take him for a man and he will work and they will let him survive. I am condemned. His little sister, who is 8 years old, is condemned. And this is the way it was. She packed my little suitcase as if she were sending me off to summer camp. And yet she knew, I don't know how, that she was condemned to the gas chamber, with the old, with the sick, with all those that were not useful. And that was my first lease on life. And this is not an abstract story I'm telling you. I'm telling you a story of human existence and all the survival that came later. And I'm not telling you, in speaking about contemporary problems, a Boy Scout theory. I am telling you that survival, hope, is possible, is necessary, if we are to build a future worthy of free man. Otherwise, what will happen could conceivably happen in a way similar to the way it happened only 35, only 40 years ago.
I believe you. I just hope that 500,000 people watching understand and believe that it indeed can happen, and the way it will happen is if we assume that it can't happen. Then it really has a potential of occurring to us all. And Samuel Pisar, thank you again. Let me show them the cover of this book, Of Blood and Hope. And I recommend that you read it so that we become slightly more aware of what the potential can be if we don't think it can be. Thank you very much, Mr. Pisar. We'll be right back.